tea time. You know what that means. We're gonna talk about the books that I read past talking. That's what I'm gonna do in this video. And we're gonna talk about all the books that I read last month in September. Let's begin. Oh, I need my notepad. Hi everyone, my name is Leonie and welcome back to my channel. Let's just quickly hop into the books that I read in September. I read 2 books that were kind of disappointing, and then 2 books that I actually really enjoyed, and then one last book that I actually just finished, so it's already in October, but I thought we could just talk about it. And we're gonna talk about that one first, just to get it out of the way. I want to quickly mention that I finally finished Volume 2 of Monstress. This is a graphic novel written by Marjorie Liu and illustrated by Sane Takeda. I got this graphic novel 2 years ago on my birthday, and over the past 2 years I just read little bits of it every time, and I just finished it today. I can be brief about this one. Although I very much appreciate it for what it is, I understand that this graphic novel has won like Hugo Awards. It's like a very grand world graphic novel about a girl who has a monster inside her, and it's like this huge adventure story that's full of lore and different beings and fantasy. It's really beautifully illustrated, but I think graphic novels just aren't really my medium, because I found that I had a really hard time remembering what was happening and understanding what was going on. Probably also because I read this in like snippets dispersed over 2 years, but so I just don't think I'm going to continue this series, and I just wanted to give you an update on that. Okay, now let's go on to like the full-length novels. The first book that I want to talk about today is the Fairy Loot book that was in the August box that I unboxed like a few weeks ago. It's Star Daughter by Sveta Takrar. Oh, I love this cover. It's so pretty, so beautiful, nice glittery edges, wonderfully illustrated on the inside, but unfortunately the beauty of the physical copy did not match the beauty of the story, in my humble opinion. This one kind of disappointed me. Yep, with kind of disappointed I mean that I struggled so much to get through this that I had to listen to the audiobook for a bit to just get to the end and then read the end in physical form, because without the audiobook I could not get myself to actually finish this book. That's not a good sign. So let me tell you what this is about. This is a YA fantasy it's an urban fantasy. It's about this girl who lives in New York, and I think she is Indian. I know that the story is very much inspired by Hindu mythology, and this girl's mother is a star. So when she accidentally injures her father, she's taken up to the star kingdom in the sky, and she has to enter this magical talent show, and if she wins she can save her father. I really liked that part of the story, the star part, just all the beautiful descriptions of this place with all its starry constellation themed things. Although I enjoyed like the fantasy lore, I do think it's kind of wasted potential, because I just wanted more. That's, I think, my main critique of this book, is that I enjoyed aspects of it. I just wanted a lot more of them and a lot more depth. Sveta Takrar created this beautiful star kingdom, and I just wanted to know more. Like, what is life like there? Like, what's the culture like there? How does everything work? Like, what is the background of these different characters that live there that we're introduced to? Like, what do their lives look like? Are there any intricacies going on? I just wanted to know more about everything. We are introduced to many side characters, but they all just exist to aid the main character and to explain things to her. Sometimes you read a book and it just feels like all the side characters are just NPCs in like a Pokemon game that exist to tell you where the Pokemon gym is and where you should go to train your Pokemon. That's what this book felt like. There's one scene in this book that I think really kind of sums up the vibe that this book gave me. It's not really a spoiler, but there's the scene where the main character like dances among the stars. We are told that she sees everything about her ancestors and that now she understands everything about the relationship between stars and humans. And I was like, are you going to describe what she saw there? Oh, you're just gonna say that she saw everything and now she understands everything? And we just have to believe that? okay, the author can clearly write very beautifully. So I would have just liked to see her actually write those things out instead of just telling us, instead of showing. And also the Magic Talent Show comprises about 50 pages of this 450-page book, and the middle part is mostly just a lot of characters talking to each other. There's a lot of family drama going on, like family intrigue, so I do think if that's something that interests you more, you would enjoy this book more, because that's just also something that I'm not really into. I really liked the beginning, like the initial intrigue of the main character being in New York and then taken up to the Star World, and I did enjoy the end with the talent show. But everything else I just think could have been more developed, so I ended up giving this like 2 stars. Moving on to a not disappointing book. I read Girls with Sharp Sticks by Suzanne Young. This book was published I think last year, but it is a YA dystopian, which I know you don't really see that very often in the modern times anymore. That in itself already made me very happy, because this book reads like a 2010 dystopian in like the best way possible, and that already made me happy. Okay, I need to explain what this book is about. It's a dystopian mystery, so it's probably better if you don't know too much, but the basic premise of the story is that we have our main character. She lives with a bunch of other girls at the Innovations Academy. All the girls there are taught to be obedient and prim and proper and not question authority in any kind of way, because they need to be perfect and obedient. But slowly but surely these girls kind of figure out that something is going on at this academy. Things are off. It's really nice because on the one hand I was really craving a thriller mystery book that just made me want to keep reading constantly, because you want to know what the heck is going on here. And on the other hand, I always find a lot of comfort in books about girls, you know, learning how to think for themselves and like having people underestimate them and then learning to be more assertive. That makes me very happy. I would call this like a cozy feminist story. I do have one little thing to say about like the feminism of this story, because I know that it's kind of branded as like a very feminist story. So I just want to say, don't expect like anything like super deep. It remains pretty surface level. You're not gonna get any like deep insights or important critiques of a modern Western patriarchal society. It does go into, I guess, aggression and assault, and also, you know, girls learning to stand up for themselves and think for themselves, and I really appreciated that. I don't think you're gonna learn anything new from this novel, but you know, that's fine. Like sometimes you just want to read cozy feminism, sometimes you just want to read a story about girls who are being oppressed and then like learn to fight their way through it, and you don't have to think too much about it. Like there are other books that serve that purpose. This book is more just like fun. I do think that the general theme of this book is that people are kind of programmed to think a certain way or to behave a certain way by society, but you can always override that, and you can always change your way of thinking and your way of behaving, and you can learn to break free from that. I highly recommend, if you're gonna read this, don't look up anything about this book. Don't even look up like the second book and the third book in the series. Like you don't want to know anything. That's gonna keep the mystery the most alive, I think. So I ended up giving this book 4 stars, and also no one talks about this book. I've never heard anyone talking about this book. My friend gave this to me for my birthday and she said that this is an underrated fave. This is now also an underrated fave of mine. I highly recommend this if you're in the mood of like just like a fun, thrilling, dystopian feeling novel. Another book that I read, oh, we keep seeing my, what do you call that? Like my thermal t-shirt underneath here. I don't want that to be visible. I keep having to pull it down. I just want you to see this really pretty blouse that I'm a big fan of, that makes me feel very fancy. So, an audiobook that I listened to this month was Essentialism. I was really excited about this book. If you're someone that sometimes watches Matt Diavella and Nathaniel Drew about minimalism, then maybe you have heard about this book, because those YouTubers keep talking about this book. It's called Essentialism. It's about this life idea called essentialism, which is basically that you focus on only the essentials of life and that you learn to find out what the essential things in your life are and then get rid of all of the clutter It's kind of like minimalism, but for your behavior and your life, I guess, and not just stuff. So that premise got me very intrigued because I was like, that sounds really cool. But I ended up kind of disappointed in this novel, unfortunately, and that is because no, okay. Let me just start off by talking about the positives. I have notes on my phone. What I really enjoyed about this book is that it really focused on how it's not very good of us to always focus on productivity, and that we kind of see being busy as a good sign. Like, the busier you are, the more you have to do constantly, the better you're doing. And this book kind of tries to fight that idea by basically saying, well, if you manage your life in such an efficient way that you don't have to be constantly busy, then that's actually better. You know, if you're constantly busy and you're constantly working, then maybe that means that you should take it down a notch maybe, or use your time a little more efficiently. Very clearly assuming that that's possible and you're not someone that works all the time because you have to, because that's how you need to make your money. I'll get to that. And I do think this book had a bunch of practical tips that I wrote down, like, for example, that you just have to accept the fact that you're probably really bad at managing your time, and it's really good to always plan in a buffer. He talks about how to learn to say no to things. If you say yes to everything, you may think that you're making everyone happy, but if you say yes to something that you don't actually have time for, you might actually end up hurting that person, because you don't actually have the time for them that you promised them. So it's better to just say no. So you can say yes to things and then fully focus on the things that you do say yes to. Makes sense, but sometimes you just need to hear someone say it. What I didn't like about this book though is that it's extremely focused on the companies. Every time that the author would come with an interesting insight about life, I was like, ooh, interesting, how can I use this in my daily life? And then he would start to give examples of how they use this in Silicon Valley and how this startup used it to maximize their profit. Not what I wanted. It's very clear that this book was written for people who are probably already like kind of have a sort of successful career and are more in kind of like the company life, doing their thing there. Because there was some advice in here that to me was very obvious, kind of concerned me that it was presented as if this was like some kind of groundbreaking advice. There was this whole chapter on the importance of sleep and having 8 hours of sleep, and how it's not a good idea to like experiment with only having 3 hours of sleep every day to maximize your productivity, and that that's actually bad for you. Which I was like, yeah, kind of obvious. I don't know how many people do that, but okay. Or how it's important to not check your email first thing in the morning when you wake up, but that it's important to take at least a full 10 minutes of time for yourself before you start working. Groundbreaking, I know. So I don't think I was the target audience for this book. Maybe I just got the wrong idea, but I thought that this was going to be like more practical and applicable to everyone, but it's very clearly advice for those CEO hunting types. So that was kind of a disappointment to me. And I ended up giving it 2 stars because I did get like some advice from it that I'm gonna take with me, but it wasn't as life-changing as I hoped it would be. And now on to another book that I did really enjoy. And that was A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl is a psychiatrist, and he survived Auschwitz in the Second World War. And he developed this psychological, how would you call this, practice called logotherapy based on his experience there, based on how to find meaning in life. Even when he was like in the camp and what he saw happening around him, that even the people in the... Whoa. Words, sentences, I apparently cannot today. The first half of this book is his experience in the camps, and he, among other things, talks about how even in like these most dire circumstances, people still find ways to find meaning. It was extremely interesting to read about. I have so many tabs in here. It's just like 170 pages and it's full of tabs, so I thought I would just share the most interesting insights of this book. I think the main message that I got from this book is that even in the most like dire circumstances, the most terrible external things are happening to you, you can always take responsibility to how you react to a certain situation, and through that you can still give meaning to your life. Okay, I'm just going to share some of my favorite parts. Man needs a goal, a meaning, something to strive for in life in order to survive suffering. But the thing is, suffering is unavoidable in life, so if you cannot change the situation, which is the case in many situations, there are just all these outside forces that you can't change, but if you can't change the situation, the only thing you can change is your own attitude. And I think that's actually a very hopeful message. He gives his own example about how he often thought of his wife and the possibility of seeing his wife again, and that like helped him through so much. At one point he quotes like a quote from Nietzsche that kind of sums it up, and that is that he who has a why to live can bear with almost any how. And it's actually kind of funny or sad depending how you look at it. This book was written I think somewhere in the 50s, and he writes that he believes that like in the future a big problem is going to be boredom, because with boredom you don't really have like a reason to live, like a specific meaning in life, and they expect it, you know, in the future. So now in our time people are probably gonna have all the free time in the world because of the technological advancements, and they're probably gonna be bored all the time, completely free of stress. Nope. One little part that just really like blew my mind that I just want to share. So he basically poses this question, like imagine a monkey that suffers because he's constantly being punctured by needles, but that is because he's being used in like a medical experiment to create this very important medicine for humanity. The monkey itself cannot understand the meaning of his suffering because he can't understand like the dimension of humanity. And then Viktor Frankl basically says, you know, what about us humans? We might think that there's no reason for our suffering, but what is to say that there's no other like greater dimension where the meaning of our suffering and the meaning of our life is explained, but we just can't grasp that. We just can't understand that. Oh my god! Did I explain that correctly, or are you also like processing this right now? That really fucked me up, man. Then on page 98 there was like an interesting metaphor about like the passing of time, for if you're kind of scared about like the transience of life. It's basically, imagine life is kind of like one of those tear-off calendars. A pessimist would kind of see that as, you know, with each passing day you tear off the pages and then you just throw them away and it just thins out the older you get. But an optimist approach would be like a man who removes each successive leaf from his calendar and files it neatly and carefully away with its predecessors, after having jotted down a few diary notes on the back. So instead of seeing life as just like passing and like every day just ends up in the trash, it's kind of like the more you move through life, the more history you build up and the more lived life you have, which is a good thing. Like that's something that you keep, it's not thrown away. Like you keep all those days that have been torn off the calendar, and I thought that was just another very hopeful way of looking at life. I can't talk about everything because I just have too many little tabs. Honestly, I recommend this book to everyone. If you really liked the little bits that I just shared and you wanna read more interesting bits, then I highly recommend getting this book. It's very easy to get through, it's only 170 pages. Please read it. I'm very not eloquent today. When am I though? And that was everything that I read in the month of September. Please let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned today. I know a few months ago I started doing wrap-ups where I kind of went through my day and did my wrap-up like while doing little things through my day. I stopped doing that simply because I don't really do enough. And I'm mostly just at home, of course. I noticed that, you know, there are only so many places in this house where I can film. So I felt like it just didn't really work anymore to make a video like that. Maybe I'll do one in the future when I think it will work, but for now, I think it just works better to have just a sit down, chill video with a nice vibey light in the background. If you like this video, you can give it a like and you can subscribe if you want to. Really hope you liked this video, and I will see you soon in another video. I said the word video very often. Goodbye.